Oh, good. I got the group chat up and participants.
Okay, so I say start letting. I'm gonna let people in.
Yeah, it's fun.
I'm live streaming now, so we're
Okay. Or oh,
we're
but the recording's paused, or it
yes,
says that.
we're live streaming.
Oh, okay. I don't know the difference, but I'll trust you.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our May webinar. Okay.
Hmm.
And we will start in a few minutes. We'll let additional people in as they come. No, has it been raining where you've been?
Yeah, it's we're getting that like every day. You're it's some downpours and then it perks up a little bit.
Yeah, I'm over it. I'm ready for the sun. The sun is finally here. I'm in Maryland. It's
Yeah.
out. Okay, I think we can begin. Thank you, everyone, for joining our May webinar. Our topic today will be Drupal, schema.org, and AI for the government. And our speaker, as you can see, is Jacob Rockowitz. Before I hand over the reins, I would like to talk a little bit about Drupal for Gov and what we offer. In addition to this webinar that we hold every third Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, our most popular event is Drupal GovCon, which is held this August at the University of Maryland. If you are on our email list, you've been receiving messages about it, and session submissions are open. So if you are interested in being a speaker, please submit your sessions. If you're also interested in being a sponsor, sponsors can submit and buy sponsorships. We also participate and hold global training days and half training days, and we organize Gov Summit along with DrupalCon at DrupalCon. If you're interested and if you have the space to hold or do a half day training, please reach out to us at Drupal for Gov at the email at Gmail, as well as Slack and Instagram. I mean, I said Instagram, LinkedIn. We also like to share other events that we hold throughout the United States. Stanford Camp in California is May 8th. Mid Camp will be held the 20th through the 22nd. And Drupal Camp Asheville is July 11th through the 13th. So if you live in those states or are close to those states, please check those camps out. As I mentioned earlier, if you have the space or you're interested in doing a multi-day event, please reach out to us at info@drupalforgov.us. We are currently live streaming now on YouTube, but if you're interested in looking at past webinars that we hold, please go to our YouTube channel at Drupal for Gov NP. And today's speaker is Jacob Rockowitz. He is
Yep.
a web developer and software architect. He is best known for two modules. Everybody, I'm sure if you worked within Drupal, you know about the web form module, and schema.org blueprints module. Welcome, Jacob. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate the description. I guess I'm going to take over and share, and I'm going to repeat the same information you just had. But actually, it's a great segue because you'll see why. I'm like, I'm going to share my desktop, and give me one second. Okay, I'd like to get confirmation that everyone can see my screen, that it's a black screen with green letters with the title of this session. Is that good?
That is good.
Okay, and now I have a lot more room. Okay, I like the thumbs up. Um, so I'm going to start. We have an hour here. I've gone through this session and it's very off the cuff. It's not scripted, so it can go from 30 minutes to 40 minutes. You can ask questions. If you ask questions in the chat, there are moments where I'm going to pause and read the chat and respond to them. Um, it's different than my typical presentation. I want to open and say, I have no slides. I started to do my normal slides and realized I wanted to do something different because I think AI is changing how we do things. And I don't necessarily think this session is the future of how people are doing presentations, but I think how I'm approaching it is relevant to this topic, which is Drupal, schema.org, and AI for government. And the session has two goals. One is for a site owner to create a government website or application using a schema.org first approach that leverages AI. And I'll explain schema.org first approach. And for developers, so I'm really, by the way, the first part is really not Drupal. It's just an approach to building a website. The second part for developers, and I could really say Drupal developers, is, to inspire you to build a recipe for a government website using the schema.org blueprints module. These are You can do these together. You can take one or the other away from this. And I'm going to start with the same question that was posed in that first slide. Who is Jake Rockowitz? And I have this slide. I've used the slide many times about me and my information. I have my own blurb. But what I want to do is use AI to actually do this for me. And I've asked this question a million times, and each time it's a different result, which is why this is kind of off the cuff. And we'll see what happens. And I even going to talk through the results kind of to say what's right and what's wrong. It figured out who I am, my username in the Drupal community. It picked up that I'm a software architect, open source contributor, that I'm based in Brooklyn, that I have over 2 decades of experience in web development and advancing Drupal's ecosystem with his work on key modules. By the way, this says it better than myself and this is all coming from all the information that I put out there on the web, and it's picking that up. And it's catching my two contributions, the web form module, that I started maintaining that in Drupal 8 and schema.org blueprints. And we're going to really focus on that. So I'm going to skip this because that's going to be the main topic here. And I do appreciate that it pulls in my work history a little bit to say that, yes, I work for Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. And in the community, I'm a speaker. I'm dedicated to Drupal. And you can find out more about me at jrockowitz.com. Um, sorry, the Chrome from the Zoom is kicking in to admit people to the room. I'll click it as I see it. Okay. So to really just give you the quickest introduction to schema.org, I am going to go and ask ChatGPT to display all known information about me, Jacob Rockowitz, in schema.org Jasona. Fortunately, my name is pretty unique. If you said John Smith, I'd be really curious to see what happens. But what it's doing is taking that same information and saying, this is what we have collected over the web, and it's repeating it in JSON LD. This is structured data that search engines and AIs, and we're going to go into it, understand. And let's see what it gets. I appreciate that it has continually gotten what college I went to wrong. 90% of the time, it gets it completely wrong. I went to Purchase. I never went to RIT. I don't know where it conjectured that or made that up. But everything else on this page, and I'm going to review it to be really correct on saying this, The LinkedIn, I actually think I managed to snag Jay Rockowitz and not Jacob Rockowitz as my path. But 80% of this is accurate and spot on. And I see that as a pattern with a lot of AIs is 80% of the time you can get it right and 20%, man, don't trust it. And we're going to see it skid off the rails at some point. So I'm preparing you for that. And you can do this even for yourself or your own organization. And it illustrates a really powerful feature that we're going to just start seeing is on any web page, you might want to do a pattern where you say, what is good schema.org JSON LD for my organization, where it's going to Drupal for Gov, collecting the information that it has, not even just from the homepage, but from the web, and building out a really good starting point. And I don't know if this is correct or not, but it's a good starting point. It's catching all this information that's out there. And I just want to say one amazing pattern here is you can do this for any web page, get the information, correct the information, and then insert it into the head of the page. And you've just gained a huge SEO bump and a machine learning bump because you've just corrected what it's misunderstanding. Frankly, you're getting to that 100% accuracy if you need that. So let's dive into schema.org and ask AI, what is schema.org and why should I use it? And I know a lot of people are familiar with this, but frankly, we're teaching the machine what we're talking about and helps the topic along. And it's pulling stuff directly from the homepage. That Schema.org is a collaborative, community-driven initiative by Google, Microsoft, and Yahoo to create a shared vocabulary for structured data on the web. I appreciate that it's changing the text a little bit to emphasize just the vocabulary and structured data, not just SEO. And Schema.org provides standardized set of types, properties, and relationships. I will admit this relationship thing might be it's learning from what I want to emphasize about Schema.org. A type meaning a thing, like an event, properties meaning the start date, and a relationship would mean the location of an event. And JSON LD is primarily the recommended format, but I do want to emphasize this that there are three formats it's recommending. There are Schema.org is incredibly well documented and very versatile. And frankly, you see that in the AI and LLMs understanding it. And why use it? Well, SEO was the original purpose to improve SEO. And it's hinting at, and I don't know if it's going to go into it, but Google has its own subset of schema called, I think it's Google structured data. And it's a subset where if you use it, you'll get rich results in their search engine. So when you see an event or a recipe in a search result in Google, it's usually driven off of schema.org on a web page. It is starting to recognize, and the AI is recognizing how important this information is for AI modules and virtual assistants and chatbots. Chatbots are clearly one of the most immediate, and chatbots are going to go away and AI is going to replace them. But when you see FAQs in a chatbot, like where it answers a question, generally it will look at schema.org JSON LD for FAQs, commonly questions and answers. And then it's just standardized content across platforms, interoperability, API first. It's a way to model an API. It's for a headless CMS, and this is where I learned about it, was someone built a headless CMS and said the content model we use was schema.org, and that eliminated a lot of questions. And it's meant to future-proof your content, make it more portable, resilient, and I appreciate this example that it has at the end, and it emphasizes this understanding. And government does use this all over the place. We are familiar with it. And once again, going back to the accuracy, this is pretty accurate. This is probably 100% accurate. And now to go to this approach that I'm talking about, what is a schema.org first approach and who recommends it? It's a strategy for designing websites and applications and content models by using schema.org structured data as the foundation rather than treating structured data as an afterthought. Only adding JSON LD for SEO, this approach begins with schema.org as the blueprint for defining content types, fields, and relationships. And it breaks down the approach, says, model content types off of schema.org types. We have these types on our site, but some of them are news article, a little more specific than press release. It's a news article. And you can, then say it's an additional type that it's a press release. And it starts to hint at some properties and fields. It's calling out some really nice ones. We all get start date, but contact point will come up over and over again. Contact point is a property, say, for government organization, the example B is, here's multiple contact points to reach out to this organization. Here's the primary phone number. Here's a complaint department. Here's your you can break down everything. And frankly, we use something like contact points on our phone when we take a contact and say, here's their mobile phone, office phone, and home phone. And then it talks about the relationships that organizations have addressed that points to postal address. And then this is use schema.org as a single source of truth. This is really starting to happen, that schema.org is becoming the source of truth for structured data. And just on LD, interoperability, I'm going to go to, and then it's just doing a nice recap. Why? It's doing a good recap. Who recommends this approach? And it really is saying like it's this Google implies how important schema.org is to their, and they're even bringing up things that I've never even heard of, Google Knowledge Panels, because Google's using it all over the place. I said for search engine results, but you can also, I think, with hotel booking, they have their own version of schema.org to get hotels listed. And I am pushing heavily on this because in Drupal, I'm bringing in this schema.org first approach for modeling a content architecture. And the W3C is having government. Frankly, I think this presentation is a nudge in that direction. Okay. I want to emphasize, I always love that AIs are going to nudge us. What do you want to do next? Do you want to create a, and it knows I'm talking about this stuff. So it's like you want to do a blueprint. And we're going to come back to that. But what's really valuable is you can kind of ask a question. And this is a big shift in AIs is, with prompt engineering, you can prompt an AI to tell you what good prompts are. In this case, we're saying, what are schema.org types, properties, and relationships that are helpful to AIs and LLMs? And it gives us it's going to generate a nice overview. Let's see. I'm going to allow this person while this is generating. I'm going to, I'm checking time just to make sure. It's very funny. These results change and the verbosity increases and decreases depending on the day. But let's go through it. It's easy to understand and respond to. So some helpful types, it's pulling primary types here. Like people have person, and we can scroll over and it says why it matters. What's the use case? If we go back, event, I want to see if there's anything that stands out to us that's a little different. Event, creative work. So everything that's an article, video, podcast is a creative work. So they're kind of giving you frankly, this is a way to learn about schema.org. It's a good example where it understands it so well. It's guiding us to say creative works are really important. Location information, e-commerce, which I'm not going to talk about, but it's a very extensive schema. And then it gets into service, FAQ. Frankly, it's interesting that it pulls that out. There's a very low level content type on schema, but it sees the value of that. And then data sets, which I actually don't actively do. It is picking up on my sector because I do a lot of healthcare. So it's saying, hey, medical entity, which is really powerful. It's a dedicated high level entity for medical information. And we could agree that colleges and course information is really important. It does go through some properties and there's some nuances here where it picks up. And by the way, something I'm going to pause is this is 100% accurate. There's not a single hallucination on this answer that ChatGPT is giving us. And I'll come back to that at the end, but to say, they're saying image and logo, those are similar. Organizations have logo. An article might have an image. Knows about these are relationships for organizational contacts. Who's a member of something, their affiliation. Yeah, temporal and spatial reasoning. Has part is part. That, frankly, I just want to emphasize, has part is part builds a hierarchical tree on your site. What's the main page? What's the parent page? What's the child page? And it goes even a little further to describe that connection between these properties. So a person works for an organization, an event has a location, which is a place. A creative work can be about anything. Data set, and I don't use them, but and this one we're going to come back to. You think about it, governments provide services, government's an organization, I want to pause on that, and a government provides services, so they're a provider of a service. And it's picking up from my previous questions a little nudge to say, yeah, this is kind of some of these example properties that you might start with. And I appreciate the little bonus. It's just making us feel a little better. And now it's like, what's the curtailed list of properties for a specific use case? It's getting ahead of my presentation here. I want to emphasize that. And I really don't want to go to government yet because I want to come back to Drupal and then come back to government because we're trying to interchange those. So how should I implement and use schema.org in Drupal? Good on time. This is going to take a second because it's got to figure some things out. This isn't just easy. Okay. by the way, I have backups to AIs over and over again. So I have Claude and Gemini, but frankly, this you just give it another hit and it'll go through. So implementing schema.org and Drupal lets you embed structured machine readable data in your website. So it's giving us, well, okay, what do you use it? So it figured out that we're talking about the blueprints module, and it's saying, you might want to use the blueprints module, and it automatically creates content type fields and entity relationships based on schema.org YAML blueprints. This is inaccurate, and I'll come back to that and let's see where it goes. Okay. Exports to Sono destructured data for every entity. Totally true. Ensures your content model stays aligned with schema.org types. And then this is completely wrong. It's not the namespace of the module. The namespace is Drupal slash schema dot dot org. And the reality is, when I built this module, I wanted to get good SEO and I didn't want to call it the schema.org module. I needed a catchy word that people would be able to search for and find the module. So I added the word blueprints. Blueprints is only the name of the module. It's actually not in the code anywhere. It's not in the code as an entity, as a namespace. It just goes off on its own. But actually, I find it funny that the AI, not the worst name of an entity to call it a blueprint. Frankly, recipes in Drupal could be better named a blueprint because it's a blueprint for a site. You implement a blueprint and then you are going off on your own. It's an interesting learning lesson. And now it's giving us a hint of some YAML that would create a schema.org content model. This is inaccurate, but it's in the right direction that you need to say, and I'll just say you're saying types, node, the bundle, and then the schema type. You're giving a description and you're picking your properties. And this is very tricky where it's just guessing. And then it's like, well, you must have a schema.org blueprint import command. That's not really true. We have like a schema.org create command, and these are mappings. And I'm not going to go into the nuances here. And now it's getting things really wrong. And I'm okay with this. I want to emphasize something. We were getting great accuracy up till something it doesn't understand. And now it's going down to the meta tag. And let's talk about why yeah, this is inaccurate. This is not the right, it's okay, but you have to double check and start searching for it. And what I want to emphasize about all these other answers about schema.org is AIs understand schema.org in an amazing level. It is one of the most common, most documented APIs. When I say that, on GitHub, the entire spec is published in multiple formats, CSV, XML, any format possible that someone would need to consume this information is available. Hence, AIs understand the structure. What is schema.org? And then I'm assuming, and I didn't ask for the raise of hands, that a large majority of people know what this is and have this on their website. AIs also understand people using it, that these are the values that are commonly used. The example would be same as it's figuring out Drupal.org and GitHub would be good places to start for the same as properties, those domains. So it's got an amazing understanding of schema. When it comes to Drupal, it starts to fall off in code. And it's a very interesting nuance is like React LLMs do a better job because there's more React code out there. Now I'm going down a rabbit hole. So let's come back to this. And it's hinting at the schema.org blueprints module, but I want to just kind of ask the direct question. And we might even skip over this because we're getting an understanding of what this module is. Well, let's see where it goes. Oh, all right, once again. By the way, this is an exercise in patience. It's repeating the stuff we've gradually evolved to, but it's giving you a summary of it. And let's see. And does even this project page domain will probably be wrong. It will probably be that namespace that it was guessing at. Yep, it would be this namespace and it would keep going. So I think it's time to give you a real demo of the module because we're not going to learn this from AI. I'm going to do so. Just for anyone geeking out, I'm in PHP store. I'm in the appearance mode, and I'm using Markdown. And these are little Bash scripts, and they have this little tool where I can run this Bash script down in terminal. I'm going to close the other tabs, and what it's doing is I have a backup of my database, and it's running these commands to open a command, just log us into the site. So I just want to get us in. Okay, that went away, which is good. I'm going to close this. And I have a little bash script to launch a bunch of pages that I'm going to walk through. So this is going to, boom, sorry. Oh, that would be very painful. Oh my God. Okay. DDev, Drush, CR. By the way, live demos, you can suffer through this sometimes. But I've done this a lot that literally and any Drupal developer would just smile at the fact that I just had to clear cache. Something, it probably was the sequencing of these URLs and how they opened, which is fine. And by the way, I can bounce back from that. This is the schema.org spec. It's publicly available. You can go to the schemas, and I want to emphasize this is just the website version. So, in it, ChatGPT, they're crawling this and they're like, okay, list all the content types, and you can say, I want to look at event. And you get here and you get a summary of the properties, the type, the inheritance. When I say inheritance, that means we're on an event, but if you scroll down, everything inherits from a thing, which has additional type, alternate name. It's worth knowing the spec. And then it has instances of subtypes of events. And frankly, these don't add new properties, they just add, some do, but it adds additional specificity that this is a children's event. I do want to say we're looking at a Drupal module in a second that's available on .org with a lot of documentation. And the best demo to start with, and I'm going to just hit refresh to get rid of that, is I'm logged into Drupal. I've navigated to structure, content types. If I'm here, I'm right on this page. And instead of doing add content type, I'm adding a schema.org type. And this introduces the UI, which gives you, this is a completely customizable page. So if you're doing a sector, like a government starter kit, you could go in and just list government schema types and even list all of them down below. And I like to not start with government, but start with something we all know about is recipes. And I'm going to click on recipe and we get this different content type creation form where this is an add content type form on the page where you're saying this is the name of the content type, which is recipe. This is the machine name. The description is blank because I have a little helper module that grabs the description from schema.org and just automatically populates it. You don't need to fill up your database with descriptions. It automatically goes from schema.org. If you enter the description, it's fine. I'm going to skip over some of this stuff where we can add some custom JSON OD, but that's unnecessary for this demo. What we're getting is the default settings for recipe saying, well, maybe a recipe is about something. We're going to have a relationship to other content types with unlimited values. We're going to have a cooking method that's a taxonomy. We're going to have a cooking time, which is a duration field. It's figuring, by the way, the module basically figures out what fields and you have on your site and says, well, the duration field module is installed and you're doing cooking time, therefore you want a duration. And it just sets it up. And yes, every field is prefixed with schema because I felt like it was helpful to distinguish it to say this is structured data, not just a field. And you can control that and say you want fields. And you can even say show unmapped. What we're seeing right now, if I go back to this, is yellow means we're going to create a new field or property mapping. And green means it's existing. So the example here is it's taking common properties, created, changed, and mapping them to schemas, date created, date modified. And in here we have this example of in language, which I want to emphasize is a really simple point about how well thought out schema.org is that they don't want a language code property that doesn't really make sense. We want to say this is translated into this language. This is the language. It's in this language. And that the schema.org community has debated over these properties enough to come up with really clean, smart, international naming conventions. When I say international, they don't have first name, last name, or middle name. They have given name, alternate name, and family name because that's a more international standard. Keep in mind, in the UI, you can put in first name, last name, and middle name. And we can even add an additional property here. So this is, we could show up unmapped. So there's a lot of properties available. We can go in and say we want to do an alternate name, add this field. And by the way, you get full control over this. A lot of this is based off default settings. You generally don't need to adjust this or you want to, decide beforehand before you even get here. But I'm just going to add an alternate name and I'm going to hit save. And what this is doing is creating an entire content type with multiple fields and relationships in 1 second, where it just set up all the relationships. And the way to move forward with that is now to say, let's add this content type. just some technical stuff. I'm not using Drupal CMS, but I am completely inspired by what the discussions in Drupal CMS. So yes, I'm using the Gin admin theme and I'm using the type tray module, which isn't in Drupal CMS, but if I had a vote, I'd put it in because it creates this nice clean UI of like these cards with icons. And there's a dedicated module because I can add in schema.org blueprints. I have a type tray module which adds icons to content types as they're created. Well, recipe, I'd like to have a cookie icon. Keep in mind, if you have a module and you specify what icon you want for recipe, it'll pull it from there. And we get this very clean node edit form where we have our title, alternate names, which is the one that we just decided to add, breakdown of ingredients, instructions, prep times or the duration field. These are descriptions pulled from schema.org. And we get this is a custom field module, which I really like. It creates a more complex field, but not a paragraph where I'm saying, here's the nutrition information, calories, carbohydrates, content. It'd be hard to show you all these fields. So there is a schema.org devel module that allows me to generate. It takes devel generate and populates this form where we can review it. But really, for our sake, I just want to hit save. And we get a good, clean display where we're using field groups. You can turn off field groups, but I feel it's good to just, your node edit form should reflect the initial display and then you can adjust this. And at the very bottom, I have these blocks that, display the schema.org data. For a demo, these blocks are not as helpful as the dedicated tab, and you can pick and choose this. This module is very configurable. So this is the data that search engines it, read at JSON LD, but I wanted to make it human readable and a little easier. But we should look at the JSON LD and say, this is what's going on underneath the hood. I did skip over something, and I'm actually going, I'd like to spend a second and come back to it. So I'm going to, and I apologize for this minor mistake because I see it in the JSON LD. So if I wanted to create the recipe again, which I'm not going to create the recipe again, but I want to show a concept that's important about the flexibility of schema. At the very bottom of this form, and I'm sorry to scroll too fast, I'm going to hide and map. At the very bottom, there's this additional mapping. So schema.org has a spec. This is a recipe. Now we are publishing the recipe on the web, which means it's on a web page, and therefore we want to have an additional mapping around the recipe. So this additional mapping is very simple. It's a couple of properties. They're very standard, date created, modified in language. The name is the title. Note how primary image of the page is frankly them realizing that for a web page, we don't want to just say image, we want to say primary image so that this would supersede, frankly, all the meta tags we have for Facebook images and Twitter images, primary image. This is the one image you should have, not multiple. That's why image could have multiple images. And I love calling these two properties out where they thought this out. Web pages obviously have related links, but we want to distinguish between a significant link and a related link. The example for significant link is if I had a blog post about a doctor doing cancer research, I would want a significant link to the doctor and to the cancer that they're treating. But a related link would be to other blog posts that are somewhat related, like cancer. And it shows you that schema helps you really define and clarify your relationships. And AIs will understand this. They'll be like, yeah, significant link is this is really important. I need to look this up. I need to make a hard dependency. If I'm talking about this page, I'm going to talk about this stuff. Related links, they're going to skip over, or they might just use it as reference. I'm going to come back and emphasize why I got here was when we look at the JSON LD, you see it's perfectly structured. We're saying we're on a web page. Here's the URL of the web page. Here's the copyright. This is that custom JSON LD coming through. Copyright holder, all customizable. And the main entity is we're talking about a recipe. And we have alternate names and text. And this is that nutrition information perfectly listed out. I will call out, there's this one typo here. Easy stuff to fix, but I got no problem calling out mistakes when you do live demos. That's going to happen. Breadcrumbs describing the context. This is huge. This is, and I want to emphasize like Google looks at some of this. AIs are looking at all of this. Every single presentation I've seen about people talking about AI models, they're like, yeah, schema.org definitely doesn't hurt. It actually clarifies. It makes them an AI really understand what's on the page instead of guessing. And that headless thing I think is really important. It's like, I'm not going to headless just yet, but one day we might, or someone might want to subset and some of my data through an API to make a headless implementation of this recipe, like share it. And I'm in JSON API, which is from Drupal. But when I create my JSON API, I'm going to scroll down and go to some real data. We're removing all Drupalisms from this API because we're using a standard. So I don't need to put field underscore alternate date or schema underscore alternate date. I'm using the value from schema.org. I am changing it. Schema.org uses a mixed sentence case, capitalization, and Drupal in our APIs, we generally use snake case, all lowercase with underscores. But look how clean the data is. And I want to emphasize any developer coming into your API, you can say it's based on schema.org. If they have a question about that value, one, they could look at the raw page, or they can go look at the schema.org spec and understand your data. They don't have to, we're not reinventing a wheel on an API. We're really not even inventing an API anymore. That just goes away. It's just shedded. The only thing you might add is your custom properties that might be not covered by schema, but schema.org is so vast, it covers most things. I, I, I feel like I have time to emphasize that because someone might say something like, you don't cover my type of event. This list of events at the bottom here, it's inaccurate. You're not covering my type. I have a certain custom event and I want to be clear about it. Every single thing gets additional type, which is meant to capture that information. So any type of information can be captured by schema, and then you put the additional type, and they're recommending you can put a string in, you can put the URL to Wikidata to describe that type, and you can get that level of detail. Okay. I am close to done with this demo, and I think I have queued up, walked through everything, and I'm throwing in if anyone wants to throw a question in the chat. I don't see any. It's totally fine. We're very good on time. I'm going to wrap up in about 10 minutes, so I'm going to keep going. But feel free to post questions in the chat. I have it over here on my side window. And I'm going to really bring us back to government because that was the whole presentation. It's Drupal schema.org AI for government. So and this is for business owners. What are schema.org types, properties, and relationships recommended for building a local government website? I felt local government was a good starting point. And I asked this question, and what it's doing is starting to hone in its recommendations. Based on all that knowledge, what are all the schema.org types around the web? It's government organization. So don't do organization, use government organization, government service. I forgot about civic structure because I always use place. But you do want to say what something's a civic structure and how important contact points are. And there's no scrolling to the left, but it gets into events. These are common types. And I don't know government websites, but this really helped me understand what are some common things to pay attention to. And then they're getting into standard stuff that we all have web pages, news articles, and blog posts. And it starts to get into some properties, calling them out, isolating them so you can start to really understand the possibilities. Opening hour specification is a very important one. That's the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, exactly what your hours. Audience, it's a good recommendation. I frankly omitted that. I forgot that one when I built out my starter kit, which I'm going to show you in a second. And then it just, by the way, this is a learning tool. And this isn't Drupal. This is if you were doing anything new in a content model, you should use this pattern. Go to schema.org, ask it some questions, and get it to give you a recommendation for a content model. And it's giving us some examples of what this, and by the way, what I like about this, this is the goal. This is my goal is to get an architecture that generates this, that I go to a page and it says, here's the organization, it has government services, event, and it's not showing us the relationships properly, but this is a good starting point. And then it's talking about the tools. It's getting a hint from our discussion. And it's even saying, I want to do YAML. And we are going to, so I'm going to ask it to do that. Create a content model based on, I'm going to collapse this, on schema.org. Let me run it. By the way, the right way to do it is you ask the question, then read it. Create a content model based on schema.org types, properties, and relationships for a local government website built using Drupal content types and fields. So I'm giving it a hint to map schema.org types to Drupal content types and fields. And it does have a good understanding of Drupal in the sense of, and I really appreciate, I don't know, I didn't scold it. It's funny, do you scold an AI? I like not abbreviating things and keeping it direct. And it figured out that yes, schema.org type is government organization. Therefore, the content type safely can be government organization. And it notes that there's a title field on most nodes, but then you're going to generally get field description, website, email, contact point. Yeah, this result is better than I've seen in the past. Look how specific. Yeah, I'm going to say this is really accurate. This is like entity reference for contact point is going to be a good assumption that you'd create a paragraph that's a contact point. I sometimes use a custom field module. It's hard. I'm naming modules. So if people go, what's that module? And you throw it in a question, I will spend a second and introduce it. Government service. This is really accurate. I found it to switch words to say service area or area served. But no, this is following one to one what how I frankly how I would take schema.org and how I take schema.org and create the content model. Yeah, it's not doing any abbreviations. It's available language. I would frankly call the field available language. Literally the first place that I I never thought to add available language to contact points. But it makes a lot of sense for government to say this is the Spanish contact number. You would be helping everyone. Okay, so we get this full example. And now it's like, let me build you some code. It so this example is 90% accurate. And if we went ahead with what it's suggesting, it would be 90% inaccurate. It won't work as expected. So we're going to go back to demo mode. And what I want to do is open up a recipe. So I'm going to launch a recipe. I'm going to close all the other tabs. And this is a schema.org recipe module that just takes a recipe in Drupal and gives us a little UI for it. So I can talk about the recipe as I click here, where I'm basically saying restore the database backup. For anyone that's appreciating my failure at the is the cache clear issue I had earlier. Note the little in the bash script, I have two clear caches because the recipes is a pretty new API and I've learned to say clear cache twice after. Just going to run this. It's not really worth waiting for it. I'd rather talk about what's happening in the command line right now. It is creating all these types. I built this, what you see here, in about an hour, and I'll get to what I built. But I said we need web pages, FAQ, and this is a summary of all the content types. I decided to break down more than just civic structure because if I'm a local government, I'm going to want to call out tourist attractions and landmarks, and it also helps me to show some different relationships. I want a government organization. This parentheses is that fact that additional I went all the way back to show you that. That's to say, we're going to create a landmark content type that's wrapped on a web page. And the importance of that additional mapping comes to person, where we're going to go in and say, I want to create a person, but I want to put them on a profile page, which is a subtype of web page, giving search engines a little more understanding. Frankly, it gives the search engine more clarity about the related and significant links. Now, for a person, you're like, yeah, that's really important. It's not just a web page with a person on it. This is about a person, and these links are going to be relevant to the person. And we're going to create an event and a job posting. I threw in legislation because, frankly, it's a brand new. I don't know what to say about that. It's a brand new content type that schema.org implemented in the last release. Maybe it's tied to recent politics, and that's as far as I will go in politics. And what we're going to get is a summary that we saw in the UI where we're just saying we're going to create an about. By the way, it's going to create an about, it's going to be an entity reference. We're going to create type, additional type. By the way, this color coding is happening because I launched this. Yeah, this is an example site, but you see we're going to have a has part, is part relationship. I'm going to collapse this and go to the very bottom and just talk about recipes for half a second to say, this is all built off of this. When I said I spent an hour building what you're about to see, I built this. It is a recipe YAML file. This is the latest and greatest stuff happening in Drupal. You should I'm going to summarize it and be like, I'm just saying, base this off of the schema.org contrib recipe. So I install a bunch of starter modules. Here's the modules I must have installed. I'm just nudging it forward to say more than just the contrib. I want these. Here's some little execute these install hooks. But what's really important is I copied this. This was a lot of boilerplate. I'm tweaking some default additional types, that specificity. I'm saying for web page, I only want to talk about page, contact page, or medical web page. For government, it's not relevant to include, for example, profile page. If I'm doing a profile, I'm going to create a person. And these are just directives, YAML directives that say, I'm creating a schema.org mapping for a node. The bundle be called page. And when you create the type, I want you to use web page. I am using all the default settings we saw in my earlier demo, so I don't have to specify all these properties. Here's the example of the civic structure, the tourist attraction, the landmark. We're starting to get into some nudging. On these, I am saying use the defaults, but always make sure to have same as. Makes a lot of sense for a local government if you're going to put tourist attractions, so you're going to list some tourist attractions in your district. You're going to also want to put same as links. That just are related links to a Wikipedia page, to the dedicated, for a tourist attraction, it's probably to the tourist attraction website. For a landmark, it's probably to the Wikipedia page. But now we get to organization, and I wanted to nudge this forward a little bit more. And you don't have to understand it, but it's just an example, frankly, how simple, once you get an understanding of how this module is working, I'm saying create government organization. These are set to true to just ensure these properties will always be created. And organizations by default in this blueprints module have members, but for government, it's employee. And that's why I say employees are true, but then members are false down here. And then for location, think about it. There's a location property. Where's it going to point to? Anything that's a place. I don't really want to say a government organization's in a tourist attraction or landmark. I want to say it's in a civic structure. And now we can add government services, person, same thing. These are little nudges. You repeat it a few times, you install the recipe, you check it, you adjust it, you massage it. And let's go back and we have our recipe applied. These errors are, I left them because they're fine. They're just the references didn't exist. You're creating a lot of references, and Drupal will be like, I don't know what this reference is, and I'm going to give you a warning about it. Frankly, it should be a warning, not an error. And we get our nice link to start and launch the site. And now we've launched into the site, and we have these content types available. Even the structure of this page can be customized. I decided not to because it was like a little extra work, but if I was going to restructure it for a government organization website, I would probably reorder the categories and move organization first because that's what we want people to focus. It'd be organization, people, locations. But it's set up this way. Person, frankly, is a really important content type. But let's start playing with this. And we're going to create a government organization. We've gone through this, so you just want to emphasize a really nice, clean form. I want to emphasize, I love contact points. That's the property I've said the most. And I didn't massage this, but this, it's just like starting with some reasonable defaults. For government org, you'd probably change this. By the way, I made this a dropdown. You could make this a text field. It could be an autocomplete field, but I'm basically saying, here's the mobile number for this government organization, telephone, email with a description. Frankly, there's a bug on my personal site. I missed this description. I make a text field like an HTML, a lightweight HTML field so people can put any extra information that might be needed. And you get a lot of relationships at the bottom. It would get really hard to start building your content types and filling out the relationships. So I'm going to show you how that's done. I'm just filling it in. I'm going to hit up this. I always forget this one. So the address is auto-populated, but the data is not always correct. And then I don't want to sit here massaging it, so I'm just going to hit save. And I got a nice little government organization page. And I'm not even going to show us we get clean data underneath the hood. But more importantly, it's not about one schema.org type that gives you the value. It's about multiple. So this government organization could have a sub-organization. And I'm going to fill this out. I'm going to say sub-government organization. We're going to have the same location issue that I need to just fix, hit save, and we get our sub-government organization. At the bottom, we're going to get a little diagram. This is a dedicated diagram module, which I'm going to go into more depth, but it's tracking, okay, we created this sub-government organization. Here's the parent. Keep in mind, because I'm using this devel generate, it's starting to auto-populate some values, which it's a pain, but I think it illustrates the point. Oh, sorry. It went back to itself because I clicked on the government. We're sub-government. Let's go up to the parent. And let's say we want to add a person to this. And I'm going to auto-generate it. And we have Ringo, Lennon. I use the Beatles names. I kind of like that. I can save it. We've added this person. And now that's a member of the organization. If we go up to the government organization, I hit edit, I could say, let's go to it and look at the relationship. There's our person, parent organization. I want to see if it got it right. Yeah, there's a lot. By the way, that's why that drop down's there to help clean things up. But you can add a role, and I want to emphasize that's a schema.org spec to say, well, you have a relationship, but an employee needs to have a job title, but you can't put the job title on the person. It's for their role here. So you could say, this is the department head. And if I hit save and I scroll down, so this is showing us our org chart, parent sub-organization. It's showing us if we have departments. Frankly, government is that complex that governments have sub-organizations and it has departments within a single organization. These were auto-populated, but then we get to employee and we get this relationship where this role is defining it. It really is a powerful feature that schema.org has included for people that want to know. I am pretty sure I'm using the entity reference override module to add that extra string to this relationship. So lots going on here. You're getting a lot out of the box from this 1 hour experiment I did with, I don't emphasize, no experience building a government website. There's in the report module, which I showed before, I'm going back to it, there's a relationships tab that generates, and this is very tiny. I can zoom in a little bit. This is the full org chart. And frankly, it's a little hard to understand because there's a lot going on. But keep in mind, if you drew out your architecture, you'd want to double check things. It helps. I'm just going to hone in on organization, government organization, and look at the power that Schema is giving us with its relationships. I have a government organization that is the hiring organization for a job posting. It can have sub and parent organizations. This is inverse of relationships. I have employees who works for with a role, a person, and then I can have legislation that's tracked on legislation is passed by government organization or government organizations responsible. That can also go back to person, which is why it's showing that relationship. The spec is aware that it could be a person or an organization. And then we have service, and government organizations have a service operator and a provider of a service. And then you see that a government organization can be living in a location, which is a civic structure. And the same thing for a job where you might want to say this is job location is at this civic structure. I'm going to go back to my slides. Let's see. And I've covered a lot of stuff. And I am at 10 minutes left, which is perfect. I took up most of the hour. I'm going to end with a takeaway. So for site owners, business owners, government, people in government, take a schema.org first approach using AI to build future-proof content models. It has nothing to do with Drupal. Everything you do, when someone says content model, you should say schema.org and then say, yeah, we should use AI. Those go hand in hand at this point. It's hard to say you wouldn't use one or not the other. And for Drupal, and Drupal is in the right place at the right time when it comes to schema.org and AI. Didn't talk about Drupal's built-in AI, but you're going to see it keep improving. And the schema.org blueprints module, I hope I sold you on that. I'm going to take questions. I am going to,
You do have a few in the
yep.
the first one by Kate. How often is schema updated?
They update it every 6 months. They do minor changes. It's been around so long that they have a system for deprecating things, but they've gotten good at it. And the classic deprecation is they were using pluralization in their properties, and they were like, this is just too confusing. So they had an employee's property, and now they're recommending use employee. And the spec is so well documented that you don't really get penalized, and you can update it. It's every 6 months. They add a few types and properties, and they clean up things. I have the only challenge I have when updating schema.org in Drupal is naming conventions. They have unlimited characters and we limit fields to 32. So when I update, I have to just double check. And legislation threw that off. Like the legislation properties get a little verbose because they're basically saying legislation passed by, you start to hit against the 32 character limit. Um, this question, I can read the questions and I'm fine with that. Is there anything specific to transit like bus routes? I would say yes for everything that anyone's ever thrown at me, there is a schema for. I'm not exactly sure how to do it, but I've found that you can research it in additional type. Also, it's an open spec that can be extended. So there are I think the biomedical industry has a dedicated subset of schema.org for biomedical chemicals and stuff like that to track them. Yeah, this question, the next question is the demo relates to building a new website. How easy is it to retrofit schema.org on an existing site? Um, it to retrofit schema.org is easy, but I wouldn't recommend using my module. I would use the meta tag module where you're going to manually map your properties to schema.org. I also want to say I think I'm introducing a new approach to retrofitting schema.org to a site, which is you build your web page, you send the data of that web page to an LLM and say, give me the schema.org, give me the just ONLD for it, and then you just clean it up and then you insert it on your page. That workflow is incredibly powerful for existing applications because all you're doing is clarifying and helping things along. To take the blueprints module, it can be a challenge. I'm working on a site where we basically decided we had a Drupal 8 site that was having a lot of technical debt, and we built a new site using this approach, and we're migrating a Drupal to Drupal migration of our old content types to our new content types and trying to build a future-proof content model. Is there anything Schema can do? Okay, is there anything in schema.org that can help convert open API specifications in their schema to schema.org types and properties? That is a great AI question. My gut says 100%. You see, and by the way, that's the beauty of open source that we're working in this space because that's open knowledge. And that means all the AIs and LLMs understand that. So if you took my same prompt that said map schema.org properties to Drupal entity types and fields, you can do the same thing with open API. And even that like point I'm trying to make is this not just Drupal. If you were using WordPress and you had a public content model, you could say something like that. I think the pattern I'd say will fall down if you're using a proprietary where AIs have no understanding of how that content model works. You're not going to get good guidance. It might not be able to understand the documentation. Is that a government recipe posted anywhere? That is a great question. It's not really because recipes, it is. I post, it's a funny statement. I post everything I do on Drupal.org, schema blueprints. I'm going to go in here. I'm going to put it in the chat. So the blueprints module has an ecosystem. Um, and by the way, I avoided diving deep into some of the technical stuff. Is you're going to see starter kits here. And these starter kits are kind of precursors to recipes. So if I go to the organization, and keep in mind, you can install this and you will get a clean website. And I'm going to check time so I don't go down a huge rabbit hole. What's happening in a starter kit is there's a YAML file that is what I just showed you. And I've just moved this over to recipes. But in the ecosystem, specifically for what you just saw, it's all here in this sandbox. And I'm sure I don't know if I can commit to making this a something I support. Keep in mind, it's a starting point. You copy that recipe, you could run really fast with it. When I say this recipe, it's right here inside. The government recipe is right here. It's a single YAML file. And even the demo as I walk through this stuff is up here in docs and demo. It is a really good question to bring up. I posted this at the end, so I got to catch up. Okay. Is there anything schema.org? Sorry, I highlighted it. Okay, no, we're at the end. If anyone wants to unmute and ask a final question, I'm very open to it. We got 5 minutes. I, of course, will stay for 5 more minutes. You can always ping me. I almost want to end. I forgot that would be that's the question missing at the end of it. And it's what are the best ways to contact? Let's see if it gets it right. Keep in mind, I've had this on dozens and dozens of slides. Does it figure this out? Oh, it's having I just stumped. That's really funny. I stumped ChatGPT. Mm, what a phenomenal way to end a presentation. I just gotta laugh. I went to art school. That was the inaccuracy of RIT. I don't know where it came from that. And for Halloween, I make costumes for my kids. And this is my daughter Lily and Ben, and it's pulling it from my website. So it was like, hey, it's his personal website. This is not the main image on the website. It's at the bottom. And it ends with my Drupal.org profile, LinkedIn. And the reality is, oh, it is, this is very good. Drupal Slack might be a good way to ping me. If you really just want to ask a question, I will probably answer it pretty quickly. Um, and yeah, I can end with that. No one posted, like LinkedIn got the URL right this time. Oh yeah, that is a good point. See, it learns. That's what it's been amazing to work with this and go back. I've done these questions 40 times in other LLMs. Maybe I end with a recommendation. I am pretty happy with ChatGPT. I find Gemini nice and Claude. But what ChatGPT does is generate spreadsheets. That is a very, very, very powerful feature. Okay, I'm going to end with that. I'm going to stop and no more questions. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Oh, no, I had pleasure doing web forms. Um, okay, we have 3 minutes. That was a lot of fun, by the way. I just appreciate you guys listening to that.
Yeah. Thank
And it
you for
was,
educating us
yeah,
on schema.org, AI, and how you can use it to organize your content data. That was
yeah, yeah.
informational.
Have fun with the module, ask questions. I'm open to helping. Boy, if you get into a juicy website, I'm offer to helping anyone with it because it's not hard for me to give a little guidance because you need to read the spec and just implement the module correctly. So I can and do that. I actually have church bells ringing and I do need to drop.
Okay.
So,
All right. Well, thank you,
okay.
everybody, and see everyone next month.
Yep. See you.